The stars had never seemed so cold to Jake Morrison as they did that night. He stood at the observation window of the orbital defense station, watching Earth spin slowly below. The blue and green planet looked peaceful, unaware of the storm coming toward it from the darkness of space. Behind him, the command center buzzed with quiet activity. Men and women in uniform moved between stations, their faces tight with worry. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone had seen the messages. Captain Lisa Bennett walked up beside Jake holding a datapad. Her short blonde hair was pulled back, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She had not slept in 3 days. "They are entering the asteroid belt," she said quietly. 50 ships, maybe more. "Our sensors can barely count them all." Jake nodded. He had been a tactical officer for 8 years, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. The Varketh Dominion was not like anything humanity had ever faced. They were not from Earth, they were not even from nearby stars. They had come from across the galaxy, following old radio signals that Earth had sent into space decades ago. For 6 months, the Varketh had watched humanity. They studied human cities, human weapons, human technology. They watched from the dark spaces between planets, recording everything. Then 2 weeks ago, the message came. The message was simple and brutal. Submit to the Dominion. Surrender all weapons. Accept Varketh rule, or face complete destruction. Earth's governments had argued for days. Some wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to run and hide. But in the end, humanity did what it always did when backed into a corner. They said no. Now the Varketh fleet was coming to make good on their threat. Admiral Zexthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Fang. He was tall, even for a Varketh, with dark purple skin and 4 arms, 2-handled weapons, 2-handled controls. His people had evolved for war. Around him, his officers prepared for battle. They moved with confidence, with certainty. This was their 347th conquest. They had crushed empires that spanned dozens of star systems. They had broken species that had mastered technologies humanity could not even imagine. And Earth? Earth was nothing. A single planet. Primitive weapons. No faster than light travel. No energy shields. No plasma cannons. The humans still used chemical rockets and nuclear bombs like children playing with fireworks. "How long until we reach their planet?" Zexthor asked. 17 of their hours, Supreme Admiral, replied his second officer. Zexthor allowed himself a small smile. By tomorrow this would be over. The humans would kneel or they would die. Either way, the Dominion would claim another world. "Open a channel to the human defense forces," he ordered. On Earth, President Helen Brooks sat in the emergency command bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, military leaders from every nation gathered around a massive holographic display. The Varketh fleet appeared as red dots moving steadily toward the blue marble that represented Earth. "Incoming transmission," announced a communications officer. The holographic display changed. Admiral Zexthor's face appeared, alien and terrible. His 4 eyes stared at them with barely concealed contempt. "Humans," the alien voice said, translated by their computers. "This is your final warning. My fleet carries weapons that can crack your planet like an egg. We can boil your oceans. We can turn your cities to glass. You have 1 hour to transmit your complete surrender. After that, we will demonstrate our power on your moon. And then we will come for you." The transmission ended. The room was silent for a long moment. Then President Brooks stood. She was 60 years old, a grandmother, a former teacher. She had never wanted to be a wartime leader. But here she was. "Send our response," she said quietly. The communications officer looked nervous. "What should I tell them, Madam President?" Brooks looked at the faces around her. She saw fear there, yes, but she also saw something else. Determination, anger, the human spirit that had carried their species from caves to space. "Tell them no," she said. "Tell them Earth does not bow. Tell them if they want our world, they will have to take it from our cold, dead hands." On the orbital station, Jake Morrison received the order to prepare for combat. Around him, the station's weapons came online. Missile tubes loaded, laser batteries charged, point defense systems activated. It was not enough. Everyone knew it was not enough. The Varketh had shields that could stop nuclear weapons. They had ships the size of cities. They had conquered 300 worlds. But Lisa Bennett stood at her command post and began issuing orders anyway. Ryan Cole climbed into his fighter craft even though he knew it was probably a suicide mission. Thousands of other humans did the same, preparing to fight an enemy they could not hope to defeat. On the moon base, Major Amy Carter checked her weapon for the 10th time. Her Special Forces team had been ordered to defend the mining colonies. The intel report said the Varketh would probably try to land there first to establish a forward base. "They are really big, aren't they?" asked one of her soldiers, staring at the tactical display showing the approaching alien fleet. Amy smiled grimly. "The bigger they are, the harder they fall." It was bravado and everyone knew it. But it was all they had. In a civilian research lab in Geneva, Dr. Peter Walsh worked frantically on a project he knew was impossible. He was trying to turn a mining laser into a weapon powerful enough to hurt a Varketh ship. The math said it could not be done. The physics said it was impossible. But Peter had never been good at accepting impossible. He was human after all. Humans had walked on the moon when everyone said it was impossible. Humans had split the atom, cured diseases, built computers that could think. Impossible was just a word. The Varketh fleet crossed into the orbit of Mars. They did not slow down. They did not hesitate. They came on like a wave of darkness, their ships blotting out the stars. On Earth, sirens began to wail. Families huddled together. Prayers were whispered in 1,000 languages. Some people ran. Some people hid. But most just watched the sky and waited. Jake Morrison gripped the edge of his console and took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment when humanity would either rise or fall. When they would fight or surrender. When they would prove they deserved to exist among the stars or die trying. "All stations report ready," Lisa Bennett announced. "Then let us show them what humans are made of," Jake said quietly. The Varketh fleet entered Earth's outer defense perimeter. And the war began. The first missile strike lit up space like a new sun. Jake Morrison watched from the tactical station as 36 nuclear warheads streaked toward the approaching Varketh fleet. They were the most powerful weapons humanity had ever created, each one capable of destroying a city. They exploded against the alien shields like raindrops hitting a windshield. "No damage," reported the sensor officer, her voice shaking. "Their shields absorbed everything." Lisa Bennett gripped her command chair. "Launch Wave 2. All stations begin evasive maneuvers." The Varketh response was immediate and devastating. Green energy beams lanced out from their lead ships, cutting through space at the speed of light. The orbital station shuddered as the shields took multiple hits. Alarm screamed throughout the command center. "Shield strength down to 60%, Jake called out. "We cannot take many more hits like that." Around Earth, the battle was spreading. Human ships, small and fragile compared to the Varketh giants, darted between the alien vessels like wolves harassing bears. They fired missiles, lasers, anything they had. Some shots bounced off shields. A few got through, scoring black marks on alien armor that healed itself within seconds. The Varketh destroyed 12 human ships in the first 5 minutes. Ryan Cole pulled his fighter into a sharp turn, avoiding a plasma bolt that would have vaporized him. His hands were steady on the controls, but sweat ran down his face. He had trained for space combat his entire adult life, but the simulations had been nothing like this. "Blue Squadron, form up on me," he commanded over the radio. "We are going for their engines." Maybe the shields are weaker there. 6 fighters followed him toward a Varketh cruiser. It was enormous, bigger than any building Ryan had ever seen. Its weapons tracked them, firing streams of energy that turned 2 of his pilots into expanding clouds of debris. Ryan did not slow down. He could not afford to think about the deaths. He armed his missiles and fired at point-blank range, then pulled up hard to avoid crashing into the alien hull. The missiles struck the cruiser's engine section. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a small explosion rippled across the hull. It was barely visible, just a tiny crack in the alien armor. But it was damage. Real damage. "Did you see that?" Ryan shouted into his radio. "We heard it. We actually heard it." The celebration lasted exactly 3 seconds. Before the cruiser's point defense, systems came online and started hunting the remaining fighters. Admiral Zexthor watched the battle with growing annoyance. The humans were losing, of course. There was never any doubt about that. But they were not surrendering. They were not running. They were fighting with a desperation he had not expected. "Casualties," he demanded. "Minimal, Supreme Admiral. We have lost 4 fighters and sustained minor damage to 3 cruisers. The humans have lost 40% of their orbital forces." Zexthor nodded. "Send the landing forces to their moon. We will establish a base there and show them the futility of resistance." On the moon, Major Amy Carter watched the Varketh dropships descend through the thin atmosphere. There were 12 of them, each carrying hundreds of alien soldiers. They landed near the main mining colony, their ramps lowering to release troops in powered armor. Amy and her team waited in the shadows of the mining tunnels. They were outnumbered 20-1. Their weapons were primitive compared to alien technology. By every logical measure, they should have surrendered immediately. But logic had never been humanity's strong point when it came to survival. "Wait for it," Amy whispered into her radio. "Let them get confident." The Varketh soldiers spread out across the colony. They moved with the casual arrogance of conquerors, barely watching for threats. Why would they? The humans were beaten. Everyone knew it. That was when Amy triggered the first trap. The mining colony's environmental systems were connected to massive air compressors. With the flip of a switch, those compressors reversed direction, creating a sudden vacuum in the open area where the Varketh troops had gathered. Aliens in powered armor were suddenly sucked off their feet, pulled into the industrial equipment. The moon's low gravity made it worse. Bodies tumbled through the air, crashing into walls and equipment. "Now," Amy shouted. Her soldiers emerged from their hiding places, firing armor-piercing rounds at the disoriented aliens. They aimed for joints and seams, the weak points in the Varketh armor. They used the environment, shooting out support beams to collapse tunnels on enemy troops. They fought dirty, fought desperate, fought like humans who had nothing left to lose. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Amy's team had lost half their people. But the Varketh had lost an entire landing force. The survivors retreated to their ships, reporting to Admiral Zexthor that the moon was more dangerous than anticipated. Back on Earth, Dr. Peter Walsh finally cracked the problem. He could not make the mining laser powerful enough to hurt a Varketh ship, but he could make it unpredictable. He modified the frequency to fluctuate randomly, jumping across the spectrum so fast that enemy shields could not adapt. "Test it," he ordered his assistant. They fired the laser at a piece of captured Varketh armor. The beam cut through it like butter through paper. Peter smiled for the first time in days. "Get this design to every industrial facility on the planet. Every mining laser, every cutting tool, every piece of equipment that can generate a focused beam. We are weaponizing everything." In space, the battle continued. Jake Morrison was analyzing the Varketh attack patterns when he noticed something strange. The alien ships always adjusted their shields in the same way, following the same sequence. It was like they had programmed responses instead of adaptive ones. "Lisa, look at this," he called out. "They are predictable. Their shields cycle through defensive frequencies in a set pattern." Lisa studied the data. "How does that help us?" "If we can time our attacks to hit right when they transition between frequencies, there is a split second where the shields are weaker." It was a tiny window, a fraction of a second. But humans had built their entire civilization on exploiting tiny windows of opportunity. Lisa started giving new orders. Human ships began coordinating their attacks, timing their shots to hit simultaneously during shield transitions. It required perfect timing and perfect communication. It required the kind of precision that artificial intelligence struggled with but human intuition excelled at. The Varketh started losing more ships. Admiral Zexthor stared at the casualty reports in disbelief. 7 cruisers damaged, 2 destroyers destroyed, hundreds of soldiers dead on the moon. These were real losses. Actual defeats. How was this possible? The humans had inferior technology. They had fewer ships. They should have been crushed by now, but they were not crushed. They were adapting, learning, fighting smarter instead of harder. For the first time in his 3 centuries of life, Zexthor felt something he had never experienced before. A cold sensation in his chest that took him a moment to recognize it was doubt. Admiral Zexthor's call for reinforcements arrived within a week. 120 new warships emerged from the darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, doubling the size of his fleet. They were fresh, undamaged, and crewed by warriors eager to prove themselves against the stubborn humans. The Admiral felt his confidence returning. Yes, the humans had surprised him. But that was over now. With this much firepower, Earth would fall within days. He did not know that humanity had been using that week to prepare something special. Ryan Cole floated in the pilot seat of his new fighter, studying the modified controls. The ship looked the same on the outside, but inside it was completely different. Dr. Peter Walsh and his team had stripped out half the life support systems, replacing them with experimental stealth technology stolen from submarine designs. "This is insane," muttered Sophie Grant over the command channel. She was young, barely 25, but she had a gift for tactical coordination that impressed even the oldest military minds. "We are sending 30 fighters against 120 warships." "Not against them," Ryan corrected. "Around them. Through them. We are not trying to win a straight fight. We are trying to make them afraid of the dark." The mission was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. The fighters would drift through space with all systems at minimum power, making them almost invisible to sensors. They would hide in the shadow of asteroids, in the radiation clouds around Jupiter, in the cold spaces between planets, and when Varketh ships passed by, they would strike without warning and disappear back into the darkness. It was submarine warfare adapted for space. It was pack hunting adapted from wolves. It was guerrilla tactics adapted from every desperate resistance in human history. It was humanity doing what it did best, refusing to fight fair. Captain Danny Price commanded the human destroyer Silent Running from his position on the bridge. He had spent 20 years in the Navy before transferring to the Space Force, and he brought old knowledge with him. He understood patience. He understood stealth. He understood that sometimes the best weapon was not a gun but fear. "Cut all non-essential systems," he ordered quietly. "We are going dark." The Silent Running drifted through the asteroid belt, its hull temperature matching the surrounding rocks. It looked like just another chunk of space debris. The crew sat in darkness, breathing slowly, waiting. A Varketh cruiser passed within 5,000 kilometers, its sensors sweeping past the human ship without detecting it. Danny waited 10 minutes, 20, 30. Then he fired. 4 missiles launched at point-blank range, their engines lighting up the darkness. The Varketh shields came up instantly, but the missiles were not aimed at the cruiser. They were aimed at the 3 asteroids surrounding it. The explosions sent massive rocks tumbling toward the alien ship. The shields could stop energy weapons and missiles, but they struggled against solid matter moving at high velocity. The asteroids hammered into the cruiser's hull, cracking armor and crushing weapon emplacements. By the time the Varketh realized what had happened, the Silent Running was gone, drifting back into the shadows. Admiral Zexthor reviewed the reports with growing frustration. In the past 3 days, he had lost 8 ships to ambushes. The humans were not fighting battles anymore. They were hunting. His ships could not find them until it was too late. His sensors could not track them. His weapons could not hit what they could not see. "We need to group our forces closer together," suggested his tactical officer. "For mutual protection." "No," Zexthor snapped. "That would slow us down. We need to press the attack on Earth itself." But privately, he wondered if that was the right decision. The humans were doing something no other species had ever done. They were making the Varketh afraid to travel alone through their own conquered space. On Earth, Jake Morrison had been promoted to strategic advisor after his discovery about shield frequencies. Now he sat in the command bunker with President Brooks and the other military leaders, coordinating the defense from a holographic tactical display. "The Varketh are grouping their ships into 3 main battle groups," Sophie Grant reported via video link, "probably to protect against our ambush tactics." "Good," Jake said. "That makes them predictable. Sophie, prepare Coordination Protocol 7. Ryan, take your fighters and make them think you are attacking the center group." "And what will we actually be attacking?" Ryan asked. Jake smiled grimly. "Nothing. We are going to make them chase shadows while Danny's ships hit their supply lines." It was a strategy of exhaustion. The Varketh had more ships, more weapons, more of everything. But humans had learned something fighting wars on Earth for thousands of years. Sometimes you did not need to destroy an enemy. You just needed to make them waste their resources chasing you until they collapsed from exhaustion. The Battle of Jupiter's Great Red Spot became famous in the days that followed. Ryan Cole led his fighter squadron into the massive storm, using the turbulent atmosphere and magnetic fields to mask their presence. The Varketh sent 30 ships after them, determined to crush the annoying humans once and for all. But the storm interfered with their sensors and shields. Their ships struggled against the gravitational forces and radiation. And when they finally realized they had been led into a trap, it was too late. Human ships had been waiting in orbit, hidden by the storm's electromagnetic interference. They launched every missile they had in one massive wave, timing the strike for the exact moment when the Varketh shields cycled frequencies. 25 alien warships died in that storm, torn apart by human weapons and the fury of Jupiter itself. Admiral Zexthor stared at the casualty reports and felt the cold sensation in his chest grow stronger. His fleet was now reduced to less than half its original strength. He had started with 170 ships. Now he had 80. 80 ships should still be enough to conquer one primitive planet. The math was clear. The logic was sound, but the doubt would not go away. His communications officer approached nervously. "Supreme Admiral, we are receiving strange transmissions from Earth." "What kind of transmissions?" "They are broadcasting the names and images of our fallen warriors. All of them. They are listing every soldier we have lost, every ship that has been destroyed. They are putting it on every frequency, transmitting it throughout the entire system." Zexthor felt anger rise in his chest. It is psychological warfare. Ignore it. But he could see the effect on his crew. Varketh warriors were trained from birth to be fearless, but they had never faced an enemy like this before. An enemy that tracked every single death. An enemy that wanted them to know exactly how many of their brothers and sisters had died. An enemy that wanted them to be afraid. On the silent running, Danny Price listened to the Varketh communication channels and smiled. They were starting to argue among themselves, starting to question orders, starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the humans were not worth the cost. "Keep the pressure on," he ordered. "Do not give them time to think." Hit them again tonight. The hunter had become the hunted, and the Varketh were learning what it meant to be prey. The message from the Varketh homeworld arrived encrypted and urgent. Admiral Zexthor read it 3 times, each time feeling the weight of expectation grow heavier on his shoulders. The Dominion High Council was sending the Chromath Guard, the elite warriors. The ones who had never lost a battle in 2,000 years. 15 ships crewed by the finest soldiers the Varketh had ever produced. They were also sending a clear message: finish this war, or do not come home. Zexthor looked at his remaining fleet. 80 ships that had once been the pride of the Dominion, now battered and scarred. His crews were exhausted, jumping at shadows, afraid to sleep because the humans might strike while they rested. He had underestimated these creatures. He would not make that mistake again. On Earth, President Helen Brooks sat in the emergency command bunker, reading reports that made her stomach turn. The human fleet was down to 40 ships. Half the orbital stations were destroyed. The moon base was holding, but barely. Mars colonies had gone dark 3 days ago, probably destroyed by Varketh orbital bombardment. Millions were dead. Billions more would die if the defense failed. "How long can we hold?" she asked quietly. Colonel Frank Newton, commander of the last major orbital fortress, answered honestly. "Maybe a week. Maybe less if they commit everything to one push." "And Project Reckoning?" The room went silent. Project Reckoning was humanity's final card, their doomsday weapon. If Earth was going to fall anyway, they would make sure the Varketh paid the ultimate price. Dr. Peter Walsh had discovered that if they overloaded every nuclear reactor on Earth simultaneously, while detonating antimatter charges at precise locations around the planet's core, they could create a runaway reaction. The planet would essentially become a massive bomb, powerful enough to create a temporary black hole that would swallow everything within the inner solar system. Earth would die. But so would the Varketh fleet. It was madness. It was genocide. It was the ultimate expression of human spite. If we cannot have our world, no one can. "Keep it ready," Brooks said, "but do not arm it yet. As long as we are breathing, we are fighting." The Chromath Guard arrived like angels of death. Their ships were smaller than regular Varketh cruisers, but moved with impossible grace. Their shields glowed with a darker energy. Their weapons charged faster, fired harder, hit more accurately. They tore through the human defensive line like a knife through paper. Ryan Cole watched 3 of his squadron die in the first 30 seconds of engagement. The Chromath pilots were faster, better, more experienced. They anticipated human tactics before they were even executed. "Fall back," he shouted. "Scatter pattern Delta now." His remaining fighters broke formation and fled in different directions. It was not cowardice. It was survival. You could not fight what you could not match, but the Chromath pursued. They hunted each fighter individually, picking them off one by one with cold efficiency. Ryan's fighter took a hit that sent him spinning. Warning lights flashed across his controls. His engines were failing. He was dead in space, waiting for the killing blow. It never came. A Chromath ship approached, its weapons powered up. But instead of firing, a communication channel opened. "You fight well, human," said a voice in perfect English. "Better than most species we have conquered. But you cannot win. Surrender now, and your death will be honorable." Ryan laughed, tasting blood in his mouth. "You do not understand us at all, do you? Humans do not surrender. We just get angry." He triggered his fighter's self-destruct, turning his ship into a missile aimed at the Chromath vessel. The alien tried to dodge, but Ryan had already calculated the angles. The explosion caught both ships, sending them into the darkness. Major Amy Carter was down to 15 soldiers on the moon base. The Varketh had sent another landing force, this time protected by Chromath ground troops. They were losing ground hour by hour. "We need to evacuate," said one of her sergeants. "We cannot hold much longer." Amy looked at the tactical display. If they abandoned the moon, the Varketh would have an uncontested base to launch attacks on Earth. Millions more would die. "We hold," she said simply. "We hold until there is nothing left to hold with." They rigged the entire base with explosives. Every corridor, every room, every piece of equipment. When the Chromath finally breached the last defensive position, Amy stood in the command center with a detonator in her hand. "Welcome to the moon," she said into the radio, broadcasting on all frequencies. "We humans have a saying. If you want something done right, do it yourself." She pressed the button. The explosion was visible from Earth. A brief flash of light on the dark side of the moon. It took out 300 Chromath soldiers and left a crater where the human base had been. Admiral Zexthor received the report in silence. The humans had destroyed their own base rather than let it be captured. They had killed themselves rather than surrender. What kind of species did that? On Colonel Frank Newton's orbital fortress, the final battle was underway. 15 Chromath ships surrounded the station, hammering it with weapons fire. The shields were down. Hull breaches on every level. Half the crew was dead. Frank walked through the dying station, sealing doors, redirecting power, doing everything he could to buy a few more minutes. His uniform was burned. His left arm was broken, but he kept moving. In the reactor room, he found 3 engineers working frantically on a project that was not in any official plan. "Sir," one of them said nervously, "we have been modifying the reactor." "To do what?" "To explode. Big, really big." Frank understood immediately. They could not win. But they could take the Chromath with them. "How long until it is ready?" "It is ready now, sir. We are just waiting for your order." Frank thought about his wife on Earth, his 2 daughters. His grandson he would never see grow up. He thought about all the humans who had died fighting this war. All the ones who would die if he did not make this choice. "Evacuate everyone you can to the escape pods," he ordered. "You have 10 minutes. "Sir, 10 minutes is not enough time for everyone." "Then save who you can." Frank stayed in the reactor room after the engineers left. Someone had to trigger it manually to make sure it worked. Someone had to stay behind. He thought about calling Earth, saying goodbye. But what would he say? That humanity was losing? That their sacrifice might not be enough? No. Better to let his actions speak for him. When the Chromath ships closed in for the kill, Frank Newman triggered the reactor overload. The explosion lit up Earth's orbit like a second sun. When the light faded, the fortress was gone. So were 8 Chromath ships. President Brooks watched the explosion from the command bunker and felt tears on her face. Good people were dying. Heroes were dying. And still the Varketh came. "Arm Project Reckoning," she ordered quietly. "If they want to take Earth, they will have to die with us." Dr. Peter Walsh had not slept in 4 days. His eyes were red. His hands shook from too much caffeine and too little food. But he had finally done it. He had finally found the weapon that could stop the Varketh. It was not a gun. It was not a bomb. It was biology. The captured Varketh prisoners had provided the key. Their bodies processed oxygen differently than humans. They needed a specific type of protein that their homeworld's atmosphere provided naturally. In space, they carried it in their suits. On their ships, the life support systems generated it. Peter had created a virus that attacked that protein. It would not kill the Varketh, but it would make them sick. Very sick, unable to fight, unable to think clearly, unable to do anything but struggle to breathe. "Are you sure this will work?" asked President Brooks over the video link. "I tested it on the prisoners," Peter admitted. They recovered after a few days, but during that time they could barely move. If we deploy this throughout the battle space, it will even the odds. Do it. The virus was loaded into every missile, every torpedo, every delivery system humanity had left. It was a desperate gamble. A biological weapon that would violate every treaty Earth had ever signed about warfare. But Earth was out of time for morality. Admiral Zexthor watched Earth growing larger on his view screen. This was the final push. He had 7 Chromath ships left, 30 regular cruisers, against Earth's remaining 20 ships and whatever ground defenses they had managed to keep operational. The math was clear. The Varketh would win. All ships prepare for final assault, he ordered. Target their remaining orbital positions. Once those are destroyed, we begin bombardment of the surface. The fleet moved forward in formation. Weapons charging, shields at maximum. They did not see the missiles until it was too late. Jake Morrison had coordinated the attack from the command bunker, working with Sophie Grant to time everything perfectly. Every human ship fired at once. Every missile, every torpedo, every weapon they had left. The Varketh shields came up, ready to absorb the attack like they had absorbed so many before, but these missiles did not explode. They burst open, releasing clouds of genetically engineered virus into space. The clouds drifted toward the alien ships, invisible and deadly. Varketh life support systems drew in the contaminated particles. The virus spread through their ships in minutes. On the bridge of the Eternal Fang, Admiral Zexthor suddenly found it hard to breathe. His vision blurred. His forearms felt weak. Around him, his crew was collapsing at their stations. What is this? He gasped. His medical officer, also struggling to breathe, checked the sensors. Biological attack. The humans have weaponized something against our biology. The Chromath ships fared slightly better. Their superior life support filtered out some of the virus, but not all. Their pilots slowed down. Their gunners missed shots. Their coordination fell apart. And that was when humanity launched its final attack. Lisa Bennett led the charge from the orbital station that had become her home for the past months. Every remaining human ship followed her. They were damaged. They were low on ammunition, but they were fighting for their home, and that made them dangerous. The battle was chaos. Ships collided, weapons fired at point-blank range. Explosions lit up the darkness like fireworks. Danny Price rammed the Silent Running into a Chromath cruiser, his ship's engines set to overload. The explosion took out both vessels, but the Chromath were down to 6 ships. Sophie Grant coordinated strikes from her fighter, calling out targets and timing even as enemy fire tore through her squadron. She died when a plasma bolt turned her fighter into vapor, but her final transmission gave Lisa the opening she needed to destroy another Chromath ship. Jake Morrison watched the battle from the tactical display, his voice calm even as his heart raced. He called out shield frequencies. He predicted enemy movements. He did everything he could to give his people an edge, and slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Varketh were better equipped, better trained, better in every measurable way, but they were sick. They were scared. And they were fighting an enemy that simply refused to die. Admiral Zexthor tried to give orders, but his body would not cooperate. He watched his fleet being torn apart ship by ship. The humans were not winning through superior firepower. They were winning through sheer spite, through the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Retreat, he managed to gasp. Sound the retreat. His communications officer was unconscious. His tactical officer was vomiting. His ship was falling apart around him. I said retreat, he shouted, forcing himself to reach the controls. The remaining Varketh ships began to pull back. 5 Chromath vessels, 7 regular cruisers. That was all that was left of the mighty fleet that had come to conquer Earth. President Brooks watched them flee and felt no joy, just exhaustion. Pursue them, she ordered. Do not let them rest. Do not let them forget. Lisa Bennett led the chase with the 5 human ships still capable of flight. They followed the retreating Varketh past the moon, past Mars, all the way to the asteroid belt. They did not attack. They just followed, recording everything, broadcasting it on all frequencies. The message was clear. We beat you. The galaxy needs to know we beat you. At the edge of human space, Admiral Zexthor finally managed to restore enough life support to think clearly. He looked at his remaining ships. 12 vessels from the 170 he had started with. 12 ships. against one primitive planet. The humans had stopped following, but their final transmission was still playing on his communication system. It was President Brooks' voice, calm and cold. "Tell your empire what happened here," she said. "Tell them Earth does not bow. Tell them we killed your warriors. We broke your fleet. We turned your hunters into prey. And tell them that if they ever threaten us again, we will not stop at defense. We will bring this war to every world you claim. We will hunt you across the stars. We will show you what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. This is not a threat. This is a promise written in the hulls of your broken ships. Leave us alone or learn what it truly means to face humans who have nothing left to lose." The transmission ended. The Varketh fleet limped toward home. And behind them, Earth began to rebuild. On the moon, construction crews found Major Amy Carter's dog tags in the rubble. They built a monument there listing every human who had died in the defense. The inscription read simply, "They came to conquer. We taught them to fear." Jake Morrison stood at the memorial 3 months later. Lisa Bennett stood beside him. They had both been promoted, both given medals, both told they were heroes, but they did not feel like heroes. They felt like survivors of something that should never have happened, something that changed humanity forever. "Do you think they will come back?" Lisa asked quietly. Jake looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Varketh were telling their story, about the small planet that broke their empire, about the species that fought like cornered animals and refused to surrender even when surrender was the logical choice. "No," he said, "I do not think they will ever come back. But I think other species will hear the story, and I think they will make a different choice than the Varketh did." He was right. Within a decade, the Varketh dominion collapsed as subjugated worlds rebelled. Inspired by Earth's example, humanity became known across the galaxy not for their technology or their numbers, but for their absolute refusal to accept extinction. And in the archives of 1,000 species, one message was passed down through generations: "We sent our mightiest against humans. None returned. Learn from our mistake. Leave them alone."